Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Star Wars Force Unleashed. I hope you're doing okay, by the way. I just hit you with a bit of a forced push. It was a gentle love tap. I didn't mean anything by it. Anyway, December, you know the vibe, right? You don't know the vibe? December equals Star Wars season. It's where the sequel trilogy came back. It feels like there's a new season of some type of Star Wars show, always airing December. Whenever I think the wintry holidays, I can't help but get some Star Wars pumping through my veins. So what I did was I started combing through the Retro Rebound catalog. What haven't we talked about in the world of Star Wars? And well, there's actually quite a lot we missed, but number one on the list that I couldn't believe, Star Wars Force Unleashed, one of my all-time favorite Star Wars games, not only for how magnificent it is, as I'll highlight in this video, but it's also one of my favorite types of games to dive into here on this channel. The type of game that has multiple versions from the PS2 to the 360 to the PSP, and every version is different, offering something unique, so there's something fun for everyone to re-experience or learn in the video. So I'm excited to go through all of them here today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into Star Wars, nostalgic, retrospective content, you're in the right place. Please do consider subscribing. I want to begin with the 360 version because that's my personal favorite due to the spectacle of this game. One of the things I love about Force Unleashed that maybe wouldn't resonate with as many people nowadays is this was at the dawn of a Star Wars story being slightly inserted in between events of the movies. Nowadays, I gotta be honest, with all these shows happening, all of these movies happening, and they're going, yeah, in the meantime of episode 5, episode 6, this was happening between it. It's starting to get a bit overstuffed where it's hard to bite onto the idea that all of this was happening and we just had no idea. I know the idea is to feed off those events and those parts of the timeline. I get it all, but it can get a little overstuffed. However, Force Unleashed was sort of at the dawn of that type of content. Force Unleashed takes place between episodes 3 and 4, which is kind of funny, right? You know, when you look at something like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, it's funny, it takes place after episode 3. It's almost like episode 3 is goated and set up some of the best Star Wars ever, but we're only just now acting like that's been the case. Anyway, this is one of the main reasons I love the game. You know, you start off the story playing as Darth Vader, wreaking havoc on Kashyyyk, right? And I love that Vader is so merciless that you're killing stormtroopers, Wookiees, it doesn't matter who you are, you're dead. You get to a Jedi at the end of your run, you kill him off brutally, and you find Starkiller, and you see that touch of humanity still left in Vader, something that even to this day in Star Wars movies and shows, they're capturing so well, in my opinion. The light human side of Vader, the good guy, the Jedi that still lives on within him, so he protects Starkiller, kills off his own troopers, and that is where his apprenticeship begins. And what I love about Starkiller is something that I wish more Star Wars games and media in general got into, is you're hunting Jedi, man. You are the villain. You're holding the lightsaber like a boss backwards. You are merciless, and I love that concept because Force Unleashed is about the power of the Force, as you would. And we've seen it time in, time out in these movies and shows and games, is that you have to concede some of that power to be on the light side, but if you give into the darkness, you lose control, but you gain that power and you use Force in destructive ways. And that's what this is all about. From the ragdoll physics implemented into Force Unleashed that send your enemies flying, to barreling down huge wooden doors on Kashyyyk, or yes, even taking down a Star Destroyer. Some people lose their minds over this scene, like, oh my God, there's no way that's possible. Have some fun, would you? This is one of the coolest scenes in a video game, in a Star Wars piece of media, period, end of story. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Look, I'm right there with you, like when Leia got shot out of the glass, I think, what was it, episode 8, and she somehow like lived and started using the Force out of nowhere. I'm right there with you. I was whining and complaining, but there are things like this where I think using the Force to take down a Star Destroyer, which is thematically in tune with the game of being destructive with the Force, this works for me. I love that stuff. But the story of Starkiller was unique for its time, right? I think of stories nowadays in Star Wars games like Battlefront 2, where you can easily see that Iden Versio not really won with the Empire, and she's gonna go turncoat sometime soon, right? But with Starkiller, it was that gradual transition. Right when you thought like this man had you, right? Like Vader's betrayal happened, stabs you, throws you out a window. He's like, you need to rise a rebellion. and start helping me out to take over the Emperor, and we know how that all goes from there. I just adore the story here of rising into a good guy in a kind of natural, almost morally gray manner, where he just kind of comes to his senses, if you will, as Starkiller, right? This guy who raised him is not the man he thought he was. And so, I mean, when you get to that final fight, it's awesome. But it's really that combination of the Force powers in the story that makes this game resonate with me so much. Like, you can get a special little unlock by, in one of the first missions of the game, taking a bunch of stormtroopers and throwing them into TIE fighters that are hanging down in the hangar itself and blowing them up. You hear the screams, the explosions. The sound design is as fundamental to the feeling of the Force being powerful as the visual spectacle you are taking in. So hearing massive explosions, stormtroopers yelling, having them bounce all over the place, it comes together. You just feel real strong while playing this game. I do think that the lightsaber combat feels a little janky. It's actually something I think the PS2 version gets a one-up on. So why don't we go ahead and transition into all of that? But first, I want to take a look at a pretty nice complete box copy of Star Wars Force Unleashed. As you already saw, we have a 360 copy of Star Wars Force Unleashed. Let's check out the back of the box here where it says, yep, you guessed it, unleash the power of the Force, like never before in a new chapter of the Star Wars saga. Here on the bottom, we have more details. Unleash epic Force powers and devastating combos. I really like how you can use like your lightsaber to dish out lightning damage combos. It's really cool. It says, discover the untold story of Darth Vader's secret apprentice set between episodes 3 and 4, as I told you about earlier, and lifelike reactions from characters and environments that are different every time you play, which is true. I really appreciate that about the game. Here we have the disc art, the manual, and the manual is actually pretty nifty in my opinion because of the opening blurb, which really just, you know, it sticks with a guy like me. Here you see, it says, Master Starkiller, at your request, I have made this training manual for you. It should contain everything that you have learned as Darth Vader's secret apprentice. When you begin a mission for Lord Vader, you may want to review your past lessons. You know, I love that kind of setup for a manual here. And you do get little blurbs again here like, Master, there are many options available to you during gameplay. And so it just breaks that sort of stuff down through your little training bot buddy. Here, it's not exactly like just telling you what the training room does. Again, it's all through the training bot, which I can appreciate the flavor. Meanwhile, here you get more direct text on embracing the dark side, your force energy bar, your health bar, enemies' health and force bars, the mini map, the experience bar, and so on. So again, just embracing the dark side. You just never see that in a Star Wars video game nowadays. I'm so confident of that. I want an evil Star Wars game. I want it bad. Or just give me KOTOR and let me just play as someone on the dark side. Anyway, don't get me started here. You see all of the Force combos that you can unlock here, actions you can perform in combat. They do have saber locks here, which is always really cool. Nice button mashing fest there. You can lock onto enemies, all that good stuff. Action camera. Camera in this game leaves a little bit to be desired during some of the boss fights, as I'm sure you'll see here. And then we get to the back, and it's always fun to see what was being promoted at the time. And here it's Fracture for Xbox 360, which I don't remember a dang thing about this game, but this one I definitely do remember. Soul Calibur 4 with Yoda in the game. You know, at first you're like, why is a Bandai game here, right? But Yoda and Darth Vader were guest characters in Soul Calibur 4. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete box copy of Star Wars Force Unleashed on the Xbox 360. All right, let's talk about those other versions, shall we? The PS2 version, for many people, is the best version of the game. Now, before playing it, I would have given you that, you know, the Rock, like he raised his eyebrow a bit, like, what you talking about? Better than the 360 version where you're doing some of the most crazy stuff with the Force, that awe-inspiring spectacle. You're telling me it's better than that? Well, I kind of get it after playing it through. The combat flows a little bit better because you're not as rigid and stuck. Like, for example, in the 360 version, you're gonna beat up enemies, you're gonna get XP, you're gonna find these cubes, you're gonna get all these talent spheres, and you can spend them on combos, you can spend them on the Force. So originally you just have a simple Force push, but then you can charge the Force push like a Kamehameha, let it rip, and send all of your enemies in front of you flying. Same thing with the Force lightning. At first it's a little burst fire, then you're letting it rain lightning on everyone in the nearby vicinity, it's chaining to them, and so on and so forth, right? It's progressing, and the Force is where you're really going to be playing with things in, you guessed it, the Force Unleashed. But in the PS2 version, I found the lightsaber combos to be a little more fluid. You could bounce to enemies easily. The deflecting and dodging, it just felt a touch better. And I think it's because it was a little less grounded on the physics side for the player character versus what's happening in the 360 version. However, the PS2 version also includes tons of new levels, some of which were sold as DLC in either the Ultimate Sith edition of Force Unleashed or that you would just buy separately a la carte. You see, Force Unleashed has some really cool DLC, like the Hoth level, where you can actually go and turn Luke Skywalker over to the dark side. I wish they played with it a bit more narratively. These are quick bite-sized pieces of DLC, maybe like half an hour long. This was definitely my favorite because I just thought the narrative implications here were so awesome. I remember playing it the first time, just being mind blown. You can go to places like Tatooine, which was a nice trip down memory lane. But then there are places like the Jedi Temple. That's one that was sold to you separately, but in the PS2 version, you go there as part of the main story, which is a pretty big difference maker there. Not only that, but there was a level that was entirely cut from the 360 version that made its way into the PS2 version in Nar Shaddaa. So you can actually go there in Star Wars Force Unleashed on PS2, but not the 360 version. And Nar Shaddaa, I have a little bit of love for because I think of KOTOR 2. That's really my only interfacing with that planet, and it's one of my favorite planets in all of the KOTOR games. So knowing that that was here in Force Unleashed was really cool. So yeah, there's more levels, there's better feeling combat. For some people, they think because of those additional levels, it makes the story better, and ultimately, it combines to make it for a better game to some, which I think is definitely an argument you can make after playing them all through. So if you're ever curious about the PS2 version, there's actually the Switch port, which you can go ahead and check out there, because I know the 360 version's easily accessible. Like if you have an Xbox Series X or S, it's there with back compat. You can enjoy it. It looks fantastic, by the way. But yeah, now you can also access on modern hardware Force Unleashed, which I thought was pretty cool. So if you're ever interested in that, you can check it out. But the PSP version kind of goes on as the unsung hero, if you will. You see, on the PSP version, it's roughly the same game here, but with some obvious concessions. You know, it's the PSP. But perhaps my favorite part of this package are what's called the historic missions. So the gameplay systems in Force Unleashed, as you've noticed throughout this video, is what I've raved about the entire time, beyond the story and the setup and the fall and rise of Starkiller. You see, when it comes to Force Unleashed on PSP, it still has those gameplay systems. It's still very much focused on the power of the Force. It still tells the same story, just like the PS2 and 360 versions do, albeit a little bit differently. But then you get to the PSP version and you can play as Anakin, you can play as Obi-Wan, you can relive Order 66, you can relive the fight against Count Dooku. I mean, there's just a ton of fights that are from throughout Star Wars history that you can redo, which is awesome stuff, right? You can play as Qui-Gon Jinn. Like, it just gives you a lot of characters to play as, and it just reminded me a bit of like instant action from Star Wars Battlefront with the heroes and villain system, where all of a sudden, just tucked away in the corner in Battlefront 2, you find this whole entire mode where you get to play as whoever you want from Star Wars canon. That moment of discovery was incredible, and it's kind of here in Force Unleashed in its own unique way. Now, it's not the only version with its own unique mode. For example, Force Unleashed on PS2 has a dueling kind of one-on-one system there. Not my favorite thing. I don't find Force Unleashed to be like a low-key good fighter, such as, say, Episode 3 on PS2, the Revenge of the Sith game. That's not how I feel about it, but it's awesome that it's there, and yes, even in that Switch port, that does carry over if you want to play that with a friend. So yeah, as you can tell, a ton of different little permutations, variations across all of these versions of Star Wars Force Unleashed, and what's great about it, in my opinion, is they're all kind of worth playing at one point or another. Do you have to rush and go out of your way to do so? If you've never played the game before, absolutely. But at some point in time, enjoy the PS2 version, which is available on modern hardware. Enjoy the 360 version. Try out the PSP version. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is my thoughts on playing Force Unleashed here in 2023. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this game. What's your favorite version? Did you love Force Unleashed as much as I do? And how much do you want to hear about that sequel? Let me know down below. With that, take great care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace